Well, thank you, Angela, so much for joining the Brand Innovators
Yeah,
podcast.
thank you for having me.
Yeah. I guess let's start with talk to me a little bit about your role and what you do at Patagonia.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the head of digital at Patagonia. I run a multitude of channels. So we're looking at product innovation. I'm also running demand generation, commerce, so actual sales performance, as well as another channel that is raises money for not-for-profits
Oh,
called
cool.
Patagonia Action Works. So we
Okay.
support 1,000 grassroots organizations each year, and I also do digital analytics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. What do you see as like some of the large shifts that are exciting from a consumer perspective and that you're considering as you move into 2025?
Yeah, there are so many cool things happening between the space of digital and in person and your IRL, as they say. And so for us, I think for one, I'm really excited about how do we take the experience that you get in a store that's highly personalized. You can talk to someone about your recent climb or your mountain bike trip and this and that, and bring that into the digital experience. And I know it's been a promise we've been talking about for probably 10 years in retail, but I feel like we're actually at the stage where the tools are there to actually deliver that with
Yeah.
conversational commerce and machine learning and all these interesting things that are happening. And so I'm really excited to explore that, especially for a brand that has such a legacy at Patagonia. It's a really natural progression for us because when you go into a store, it's very communal. We do live events there. We book signings, movie screenings,
Yeah, that's cool.
and so to be able to bring some of that into the digital expression is
Yeah.
what I'm most excited about.
That's cool. It's
Yeah,
like that IRL. It is like a community, I
yeah,
guess, inside the store, which is
100%.
yeah. When you join Patagonia, is it like required that you are an outdoorsy person?
It definitely helps. They do ask you.
Okay.
And so, honestly, try to be honest. And I took up mountain biking during the pandemic, and so that
There
was
you
one of my
go.
ends. But I've always been an outdoors person. I
Cool.
grew up in the Midwest, and my mom's favorite thing to do was to picnic in the fall in the woods. And
Yeah.
so, and both my grandparents lived in the country, so I was always like a big outdoor person. I
Cool.
hated being like confined into buildings. But, I'm not rock climbing
Not
and
rock
all those
climbing.
crazy things. I've
Yeah.
never surfed,
Okay.
but I respect and I've learned so much about those communities over the
Totally.
years, and I've learned a lot about the connection of those communities of being outdoors and how that is a great connection through line to saving the planet.
Yeah, every time I go into a Patagonia store, I feel like it inspires me to want to do even
Yeah,
more outside. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like I'm like,
absolutely.
oh, I should be biking more, or I should
Yeah,
be like
that means we're doing
hiking
our
more.
jobs.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah,
It's like you go in there for a specific reason and then you walk out with like a little bit of a different vibe,
totally.
which is cool.
Yeah.
Um, I guess what's for this year we're going into a new year. There's obviously a ton going on in the realm of generative AI and
Hmm.
machine learning. And is that something you're thinking about in
Yes.
terms of your strategy?
Absolutely. It's on our roadmap this year for sure. Feel like it's going to take some time to get there. So I've been pressing that we need to start now because it might be 2 years before we see it in a way that is really compelling that we're really proud of. And by that time, if we don't start now, we'll be behind, right?
Right.
So for us, I think one of the things I'm most excited about is that conversational commerce experience where if you are, somebody who's surfed and you're like, I want to upgrade to one of our wetsuits, we have 7. Like, how do you know which one you want and what it is? And to be able to have a conversation back and forth on, like, yeah, this is my third triathlon, or I'm actually going deep sea diving, or whatever it might be. I think it's this one, or it might be this, and what are the pain points? And
Yeah.
be able to have a really
Mm-hmm.
intellectual conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to get you to the right product, and then
Right.
also be like, oh, while you're there, if you're in Hawaii, our store is down the road, and we're doing this community event. You
Cool.
should check it out. Like, I think that's the future of
Yes.
engagement and that
Yes.
digital experience. And so we're starting to work on that now.
It also changes the relationship with a brand and
Absolutely.
because it becomes more about like I'm becoming a part of your lifestyle instead of I'm pushing a
Absolutely.
message at you,
Absolutely.
which
Yeah.
is just like so much more how people want to interact.
Yeah, I think for me with the leadership team at Patagonia, I'm always talking about like how are we not extracting from the customer, but how are we adding value to their lives
Mm-hmm.
of being part of a Patagonia ecosystem. And
Yeah.
and when I pitch something that way because they're a little allergic to technology sometimes, then there's an openness to listen and be like, oh, I get it now. I understand why we need a CRM program. I understand why we need a loyalty program.
Mm-hmm.
It's to help the customer
Right.
so that we're more valuable to them and
Right.
they're more connected with what our causes are and hopefully inspire them to help save the home planet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'd love to shift gears
Yeah.
a little bit and talk to you more about, I guess, you as a marketer.
Yeah.
And I I think it's always revealing when you ask somebody like you are where you are today. You're super successful. You've been in consumer marketing for a long time and on the retail side you said for a
Yeah.
long time. If you could give your 25-year-old self advice,
Yeah.
looking back now, what would you say?
Yeah. I would tell myself to be bolder and more confident. I think that's something that I really struggled with in my younger years. And I really struggled with finding a mentor. And even now, I feel like I just found my first really amazing mentor, and I'm so
Wow.
excited. And I'm over 50, so
Wow.
so it's never to the hope never gives up, you know. But I think for me, it was what got me to where I am is that I always was eager to learn and always willing to take on more. And a lot of times I would sign up for things and then I'd be like, I have no idea how I'm gonna do that, but okay,
I'll
let's
figure it
like
out.
let's go. Like I at least knew that I could always figure it out, if I had the support and the backup. And so I think for me, I moved around a lot in my career, and I think a lot of that came from not feeling really supported as
Mm-hmm.
I grew into different roles,
Mm-hmm.
and then finding those places where I really did feel supported was so good that I was like, you shouldn't waste time.
Right.
Like if you're
Right.
somewhere and the writing's on the wall that they're not your biggest fan and they're not advocating for you, and you know that you're doing the right thing and you're pushing and you're helping that organization, then move on.
Move on.
Because when you find the place that's right, it's so good, and it's just like fuel to fire,
It's like
which
dating,
yeah, exactly.
right? It's like if this
Exactly.
is just okay,
Yeah, if it's just okay,
then it's okay. It's not
that's
right for
cool.
you.
It's nothing against that
That's
person,
right.
but yeah, when you find that relationship that's really fills you up, and they inspire you, and they see your greatness in you that you haven't seen yourself, that's when things go really well. So
Yeah, that's
that's
great.
what I would tell my younger
And
self.
given that you sort of didn't have a mentor until you were later in your career,
Yeah,
how are you thinking about the next generation and
yeah.
mentoring, younger people?
Absolutely. I think that is why I kind of inherently often do mentor people. Like I, to this day, have people that weren't even on my team. They were like in a cross-functional team, and we still talk 5, 10 years later as we work together
Wow.
at Levi's. Or, I'm always reaching out, like, and I'm watching their careers on LinkedIn. And I'm just an open book. I oftentimes am like, people ask me questions. I have people like, I will tell you the truth. Like I have no problem, like because I wanted that. I always wanted someone to let me know, like, oh, as you're coming up in your career, know that leadership is looking at every single person, and they already kind of have a sense of who you are before you even really get out the gate. So know that it's not just your manager. You also have to show up in the workspace and have everyone kind of understand who you are as a person,
Hmm.
because your boss might go away and then you're
Right.
starting all over
And then you
again,
start all
right?
over
Unless
again.
you've kind of already built your own reputation, and taking the time to kind of know all those people, as many people as you can know within the organization, really pays off in the long run.
It's like you have to invest. You have to be the first and most important investor in your own
Absolutely.
career
You
success.
have to advocate for yourself constantly. And not in a verbose sort of like
Right.
self, like legitimately, like
Yes. Yes.
when you're doing great things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I do with a lot of my team. Is a lot of times my goal is to just make sure people are aware of what they're doing and how
Sure.
awesome they are.
Hmm.
That's half my job. Right.
And I think like there's some people who are very comfortable promoting themselves, and then there are some people that you
Absolutely.
need to almost, I'm sure you have to be like,
Yeah.
you should feel
Yeah.
comfortable
Oh, I
to
set
own
people
that.
up all the time. I'm like, you know what? This is a great deck. I'm meeting with the CEO in 2 weeks. I think he'd love to hear about this. Do you want to? Can I carve out 15 minutes of my one-on-one for you to talk to them about
That's
this?
cool.
And they're like, oh my God, are you serious? I literally just did this with the head of
That's awesome.
CRM.
That's so cool.
She's like, right, because she goes for maternity leave. She did a 15-minute presentation with the CEO, but it was really relevant. And those are type of opportunities, and they walk away, and now they know who that person is. Like, I've heard this name. I know who they are
Yes.
now. And they get to see that I'm not just pumping them
Out for
up, that it's real,
Yeah,
that they really are
absolutely.
amazing. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. It's nice to feel like you can pay something like that you didn't necessarily have, pay that forward,
absolutely.
and create a different ecosystem, different environment, different vibe on your own team.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time where you were in you were in a moment in your career where you were like had to pivot and you had to pivot fast? Like either something happened or you were like, I don't want to be here or this isn't
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And how did you kind of handle that?
Yeah. Wow, that's a really triggering question.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, but honestly, I'm just trying to think of a specific example. But I would say there's been this trend, and I don't know if you've experienced this or people experience this in this career, where something happens in one job function, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna like pivot, and then that same scenario comes up again. And I read this really interesting book once that said like the reason why you keep running up against the same problem over and over again is because you're supposed to learn something in that moment. If you don't learn it, it keeps coming back to you. And so
Like the universe keeps sending it back your
yeah,
way.
yeah, until you learn it. And so I actually learned that in my career because I think sometimes when things were really challenging, I would get so overwhelmed. I would just be like, I'd just leave. I'm going to car. I'd be
Peace out.
crying the whole
Yep.
night and just trying to figure it out and feeling really alone sometimes, especially because in my industry, depending on the brand. I didn't have a lot of friends that were in the same industry or they're in it at the same level I'm in. I didn't have people who were kind of already done it before me. So, a lot of times I'm reaching out to my friends or my family and they'll be like, you know what, just take a break. How serious is this? Instead of grounding myself and like, what is it that's really triggering you? What's really upset you about that? And then once I really kind of demystify it a little bit in my own brain, then I realize it's actually not as big as I'm making it to be.
And when you look
And
back on it, you're like, oh, that wasn't as big of a
yeah,
deal.
yeah,
But in
but
the
at the
moment,
moment, sometimes it just feels like I don't know how I'm gonna get out of this. Like you send an email, it was misinterpreted. Like back in Patagonia, when I worked for Pottery Barn, there was a moment like this where I had people telling me that email was really harsh, and I'm like, but you just told me to be more assertive, and I was trying to be more assertive, and now you're telling me I'm being too assertive, and like and that was a
right,
company there where I wasn't strong enough, but I was too strong. Like I
right,
could never get it right, and
yeah,
I was just like, okay, I don't know what that is, and I know a lot of women experience that.
oh
I
yeah,
know a lot of minority women experience
yeah.
that in a career where their feedback is so contradictory, and you're like, I'm just trying to be myself. Like I don't really know else to
I
do here.
know. It's like you're to this or you're to that. You're to
Yeah,
this or you're to that. You
yeah.
have to like really balance that. Like,
Yeah. And at some point, you just have to be unapologetic
that's
and be
right.
like, it's not me, it's
That's right.
them, right?
Right.
Like, I know that I am doing this, and yes, I can learn, and yes, I can evolve, and I'm always going to be willing to improve myself. But at sometimes when you're getting a lot of contradictory feedback, then you realize that it's not really you.
That's
And
right.
so you just have to kind of lean in on who you are, and whatever happens, happens. You're going to be okay. I think that's the advice for earlier question you asked, like, what advice would I have my younger self is like, no matter what, it's always going to work
You're gonna
out.
be fine.
You're going to be fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I think that, and I guess I'm curious, do you think that's shifting where people can show up more authentically as themselves and they're
For
not
sure.
constantly told you're to
Yeah.
this or you're to that?
I think so. I do think so, and I think the younger generation is pushing a lot of people to be like, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to talk about like this is what's going on in my life right now. Sorry, I can't show up 100% right now. I need a couple days. There's some serious things going on in my life where 20 years ago that was a no-no, and today it's embraced, which is really exciting. At the same time, I think there's times where you kind of have to find a little bit of balance because I
Yes.
have had some people on my team that I feel like they've kind of struggled where they've kind of like it's a
Too
lot.
much.
Yeah, it's a little too
Sometimes
much.
you're
And
like,
HR is
okay,
like,
don't bring your
yeah,
full self.
it's like HR is like, I don't think they should be sharing that with their team
Oh,
members. Like okay, so we try to figure that out, but it's a learning curve. But I do think that makes the work environment more comfortable. I think, especially for women, and I don't want to be gender biased in any way, but I think we do show up a lot more. We want to show up as our full selves
yes.
innately, and so I think that's something that's been really amazing to see the
We
evolution
want to
of.
show up as our full selves, and work wasn't necessarily set up in that way. It was
Absolutely.
created long ago
Yep.
by men who were at
Yeah.
work until we had to sort of like
For sure.
Gumby ourselves into it to fit.
Right.
I do think
Right.
I hope it's shifting a
It's
bit.
changing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm also on the board of Ergo Baby, which is a baby carriers, and
Yes.
so they support moms in the workplace in a lot of ways, and they do some amazing things there. And there is that the conversations are happening, so that's
Yes.
really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Angela, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today. I really
you.
appreciate your time.
It was awesome talking to
Yeah,
you. Thank
same.
you.